Hey everybody, my name is Rob Phelan, also known as the FI Educator Online. I'm so glad you're joining us today to talk about the 10 steps to buying your first home. So this isn't just about buying any old house. This is your first home, and this talk is geared towards high school teenagers who will be making that first home purchase, hopefully, in the next few years to 10 years. And we want to get you the steps, the actual actionable steps that you would go through to go from where you are right now to actually purchasing a home. And sometimes that's the most confusing part. It's just like, yeah, I know I need to buy a home. I know I need a mortgage. But anything in between that, I'm like hoping I can figure it out, or that some professional out there is going to do it all for me. And that's great. But we do also want to make sure we are equipped with what we need to know to make the best possible purchase, the right deal for ourselves. And we're getting a home that is right for us and not right for someone else, or a lemon, as we might say, in terms of like, it might not be a good home at all. So I'm joined today by Mindy Jensen, who is the co-host of the Bigger Pockets Money podcast. Also has been a real estate agent for, I think, over 29 years now in Colorado, and has a wealth of experience when it comes to buying and selling homes, as well as real estate investing and everything that there is to know about educating people on the home buying process. So Mindy is the perfect guest for us today. Mindy, how are you doing?
I am doing so great, and I am so honored that you would ask me to come and talk about one of my favorite topics, real estate.
Yes, and I think this is a very topical thing for students as well. Real estate investing, buying even a house for ourselves. Those are all things that seem to pop up for me, at least in my classroom, over and over and over again. If you guys do have questions whilst you are watching, if you're joining us live, put it in the comment section on YouTube Live. If you're watching the replay, still put your question in the comment section. Mindy or I will get in there to answer your question whenever we get a chance. But we'd love to field those at the end of this conversation. The way this is going to go, Mindy and I are going to talk through the 10 steps to buying a house, and then we'll go through some student questions. It should take us about 50 minutes to an hour. You guys ready to go? Let's do it. All right, Mindy, let's go through. We want to buy a house. And the first question we would normally have is, should I buy or should I rent? And that was one of the questions that Drea had for me. And I was like, well, we should start there, because that's actually the best question is, should I buy or rent? What would you say?
That is an excellent question. And the answer is yes, you should either buy or rent. You need a place to live. So where are you going to live? And the answer to this question is, how long are you going to be there? Are you going to be there for a couple of years? Renting is probably going to be the better option. Are you going to be there? Are you planning to be there long term? Are you setting down roots? You have a great job. You're planning on maybe getting married, raising your family here, or just staying single and being in this location forever. Then perhaps buying is the right choice for you. Also, what are the costs between a mortgage and renting? There are places like New York City where it is far cheaper to be renting rather than trying to buy a property. Your mortgage is just simply going to be far more expensive than your rent will ever be. So it depends on what your specific circumstances are. A lot of people don't realize how much it costs a seller to sell their house. And we'll get into this a lot later, but a quick answer, a quick ballpark is, it costs between 8 and 12% of the sales price of the house to sell the house. So if you're just planning on being there for a couple of years, unless you're doing something like adding a lot of value, buying an ugly house and making it much nicer and then selling it, unless you're doing something to significantly increase the value of the house, if you're not planning to be there for a long time, it could make a lot more sense to rent.
Okay. And that's it in a nutshell, guys. And I do love, there's a really great video out there from 2 Cents. Are you familiar with them, Mindy?
I am not.
So 2 Cents is a wonderful personal finance channel on YouTube, sponsored by PBS. And they have a great video about, should I buy or rent? And the one that they throw out there as sort of a rule of thumb is, what is the price to rent ratio? So if you take the price to buy the house, divide it by the rent you would pay over a given year, if that number is over 18 or under 18, that will tell you whether it's probably a better idea to buy or rent in that particular area, because that will be different across the US. So in some spots, it's going to be a slam dunk to buy. In other spots, you're probably better off renting if you're looking to get ahead financially. All right, so now let's go into our actual steps. So we decided we're going to buy. And the first thing I would imagine most of us need to think about is, what's our budget? Would you say that's step one?
I would absolutely agree with you, because that is step one. You have to be able to afford your house payment, and you have to know what payment you can afford. So I did some very, very quick math based on, so a mortgage payment is called a PITI payment, PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So that's the principal on the loan that you're paying, the interest on the loan you're paying, your property taxes, and your homeowner's insurance are frequently all lumped into one payment called your mortgage payment. And because taxes and homeowners insurance are all different, these are only principal and interest amounts on these loans. But a $400,000 house, when you put 3% down with a 7% mortgage, a 3% down payment with a 7% mortgage, your payment, principal and interest only, is going to be $2,581 every month. Can you afford that? Great. Then $400,000 is your price range. If you can't afford that, then don't look at $400,000 houses, because if $250,000 houses are where you're going to be ending up buying, you're going to kind of ruin your expectations by first looking at $400,000 houses. So you want to get an idea of not only what you can afford, but what you want to pay monthly. So this is where speaking with a mortgage broker or just even running basic numbers on a mortgage calculator online can give you a good idea of what you can afford or what you want to be paying.
Yeah, and I will link a mortgage calculator in the description of this video after we are done, just so there's one for you guys to check out. And this is one of the few times I feel like in personal finance where we do ask ourselves, can I afford the payment versus can I afford the actual whole thing? I think houses and probably maybe the cost of college, maybe your first car, hopefully not, are one of the few times where we're like, okay, we're going to take on debt to finance this because the thought of paying cash full price for a house is very out of reach for most first-time home buyers. So can you afford the payment? And remember, the payment is not just the loan. You also have other things that go into the total cost of housing. So the PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance are all things you want to consider. And a lot of those mortgage calculators online will build some basic numbers in for you as well. So you're kind of backwards mapping. You're saying like, what can I afford to pay per month? That tells you what you can afford overall as a house price.
Yes. And not only what can I afford to pay, what am I comfortable paying? I can maybe afford on paper to pay a lot more than I'm comfortable paying. So know what those numbers are, because the mortgage broker, the lender will tell you you are pre-approved up to this amount. That's the top. That's not what you should aim for necessarily. That's the top amount that you can afford. So then look backwards from that. But yes, you are absolutely correct that I am backwards mathing that. And I know you interviewed Craig Kurlop, the author of this book, The House Hacking Solution. And he has this great concept where you buy a little bit more house than you need or buy more units than you need, and you rent out the extra. And that's great, but you should be able to afford the entire payment on your own. And then if somebody comes in and helps you pay, great, that's just bonus. But if you can't afford the very basic payment, what happens if all of your tenants leave in the middle of the night?
And that's it. Like, so it's great to say like house hack, I'm going to buy a bigger house. I'm going to rent out the rooms. On paper, I will make a lot of money from this, but there is always what is the ideal situation and the real life situation. And like you said, tenants could leave at any moment. You could have people not paying rent. There could be disasters that happen that force you to not rent out rooms for a while. Like it's a whole bunch of things. Make sure at the end of the day, you could afford the entire mortgage payment on your own. I love that. Okay. So we got what's in our budget. Next up is what comes next?
Know what you want and what you don't want and what would be nice to have. These are called deal breakers and must-haves. You want to have toilets in your house. I mean, that's kind of a given, but do you want 3 bedrooms? Is that a must-have? Do you want to have a backyard that is fenced because you have pets and you want them to be able to run about in the backyard? Then don't look at houses that don't have a fenced yard, because a fence is expensive. And when you are first starting out, maybe you're super handy and you can just throw up a fence in 5 minutes. Maybe your dad owns a fence company. Awesome. That's a extenuating circumstance. But if let's just assume you're not handy, don't go into something feeling like I'll just fix it up later. No, know what you absolutely want to have and know what you absolutely do not want to have. I live in Colorado, and Colorado gets about 3 good months of swimming weather. I happen to have a pool in my backyard. I got this house because it has a pool. I didn't want a pool, but nobody else did either. So I was able to get a good deal on the property because it's a deal breaker for a lot of people. And I'm in a different position where I am buying versus, the people that I'm speaking to right now. But that can be a deal breaker for some people. If you don't want to deal with taking care of a pool and closing it up in the winter, opening up in the summer, then don't buy a house with a pool. Do you not want to deal with, there's houses that need all new windows. This house was kind of a disaster when I bought it. That's sort of my specialty. I had to replace all the windows. That was $25,000. So don't go into a house thinking, I'll just fix it up as I go. And then there's a lot of issues involved. So just be really honest with yourself, with your skills, with your network about what you can and can't fix or don't want to tackle. There's no problem. There's nothing wrong with buying a nice house. I don't do that. I buy really ugly houses and then make them nice. But that's a story for another day. Once you know what you want to have, what you absolutely don't want to have, start learning your real estate market. Attend open houses. Just walk through the house. This is where a real estate agent will literally open the door to a house, and you can walk through and just look at it. See what is selling at what price. That $400,000 that I alluded to earlier, is that a nice house in your neighborhood, in your area, or is that a complete dump? If you have your heart set on buying a house for $400,000, then you start looking like, ooh, everything is a broken down shack for $400,000. Maybe that's not the right time for you to buy. But once you start knowing what your market is, then you can get a better sense of if your expectations are realistic. Location, the number one thing in real estate is location, location, location. And you can't move a house. I mean, you can move a house, but let's not get into that. You can't move a house. So you want to be where you want to be. Stephen King has this great book called Pet Sematary. And in the book, this the family lives on a very, very busy road. And I would recommend never, ever, ever buying on a very busy road, because it is going to cost you money when you sell the house, because nobody else wants to live on a very busy road either. Whereas 1 block away is going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's also going to be a lot easier to sell. And I'm always moving, so I'm always thinking, how can I sell this house? Is it going to be easy to sell? There's a saying in real estate, unique is a 4-letter word. It is really, you don't want a unique house, because unique is also weird. You want, a nice house, you want an interesting house, but a unique house is that, everybody's seen that weird house where you drive past, you're like, oh, what does that look like on the inside? The buckyballs, the big dome houses. I used to live by an adobe house. I was desperate to get inside there just to see what it looked like, but I would never want to live in it because
I think they would
nobody
make
else wants
great
to live.
short-term rentals like a Verbo or an Airbnb. That's where unique does well. But yeah, for general like homes, probably not.
Yeah. My friend Whitney Hansen just built a flower pot house. It looks like a terracotta flower pot up in, I think it's in Idaho. Super cool. It's not just to live in, because nobody's going to buy it for anything other than Airbnb. But that gives an interesting point. What can you do with the house if you don't want to house hack it? Perhaps you can make money in other ways, like renting it out if you're starting to travel.
Yeah. And then that's what we really want to think about is like, okay, so what do I want in terms of the inside of the house? Where do I want it to be? Other features to consider might be things like the school system, if that's something that's important to you. So do you think you want to have kids someday, or just for the selling value of the home? If it's in a good school system, it's going to stay as a more desirable home. What other things do you want in the area? Do you want shops? Do you want movie theaters? Do you want access to XYZ? Do you want mountains? Do you want rivers? Like what do you want in your immediate area? What's important to you? What brings you joy? And I think looking inside first is so important before you start the home buying process, because you want to get the house that's right for you, not what everyone else tells you is the American dream or what you should want in a house. And that's where I think so many of us fall into that trap of, well, what's popular? What does everyone else want right now versus what do I want? And if you can figure that out, I think you're on a great first or second step towards buying your home.
Exactly. And one last thing is, what is the proximity to jobs? You might have a job that's just down the street now, but if that's the only employer, maybe that's not the best place for you to be working unless you own the company.
Or are you going to be
Or
remote?
best place for you to be living.
Yeah. Or are you going to be remote and location doesn't really matter as much? You can go for more beautic, scenic, because you're like, I'm going to be working from home anyway. And I need a space that's, I'm going to be spending a lot of my time in. So I need it to be very beautiful and inspiring, creative, whatever it is. So yeah, just know what it is your industry might be, especially you guys in high school. You might not know exactly what that's going to be yet. So figuring that kind of stuff out is a great starting point. All right, now you mentioned the agent, we've mentioned the lender. Those are going to come up next. So step 3, guys, is to get an agent. And Mindy is an agent, and Mindy is one of the people I've talked to who doesn't just say all agents are great, which I love. So Mindy, without really trying to alienate anyone else in your profession, can you tell us a little bit about how do we find a good agent? Because one of the questions I had as well, and this one came from Maddie, was, well, how do I tell the difference between realtors? Are they all the same? Is it just someone who opens a door for me? Or is there actually some value in here that I need to be finding from a good agent?
So they are not all the same. And I actually was having a conversation with a fellow agent friend who we came to the conclusion that you've heard of the 80-20 rule, 80%, 20% of the people do 80% of the work or something like that. We came up with the 93-7 rule for real estate agents. 7% of the agents do 93% of the work, and 93% of agents are maybe not the ones you want to work with, and 7% of the agents are the ones you want to work with. And I think the best way to find a good agent, not just any agent, but a good agent, is to ask your family and friends and, neighbors, people near you, who did you use? Would you use them again? Did you like them? And what was it that you liked about them? Because if somebody used an agent and didn't like them, they'll tell you. They'll give you the name. They'll be like, "Ugh, don't ever use Jennifer. She was horrible." Great. I won't. Why did you not like her? These are the things. And just because they didn't like Jennifer doesn't mean that you won't. But when you start to see all the things that Jennifer didn't do, like not answering the phone, and these are very common with a lot of real estate agents, they don't answer the phone. It takes them a long time to get back to you. They don't have the information for you. They don't get it to you quickly. Right now, we are in a very low inventory market, and we will continue to be in a low inventory market for the foreseeable future. Back in 2008, the stock market crashed and the housing market crashed, and we stopped building new houses. We didn't build in 2009, 10, 11, 12, into 13, 14, some places. That's a long time with very little new inventory on the market. And then we had a huge run up in 2022 when the Fed said, hey, we're going to raise rates in the future. And people are like, ooh, I better buy a house now. So all these people with 3% mortgages aren't excited to sell those properties. Why would they? They're going to trade their $1,500 mortgage payment for a $3,000 mortgage payment for lesser of a house, or, a $4,000 mortgage payment. So prices went up with demand, and we find ourselves in a very tight housing market. And you need an agent who is going to respond quickly, and get you the information you need so you can make an informed decision. At the beginning, Rob mentioned that there might be some professional that you want to help you or help you do the work for you. Your agent is the person that is supposed to help you by giving you all the information. You should feel comfortable asking them questions. And a lot of agents can be kind of intimidating. First of all, don't let them intimidate you. They're not any better than you. But also, if you feel intimidated, then that's not the right agent for you. You want somebody who speaks your language, who speaks to you in the way that you want to be spoken to, who communicates the way that you want to. I had a rather unpleasant experience once, and I like everything in writing. So if you call me, I'll talk to you on the phone and then I'll send you a follow-up email. Hey, just to reiterate, this is what we talked about on the phone, because I want it in writing, um, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. But if you want to text me, I love texting because I can scroll through that and find what you said, get all the information to you. If you don't want to text your agent, or if you text your agent and then they pick up the phone and call you, maybe that's not the right agent for you. Maybe you want to be texting. Maybe you want to, I don't know what all the kids are doing now, Snapchat or WhatsApp or whatever. I'm not very cool. Clearly, you can already tell that. But however you want to communicate with your agent, that's how your agent should be communicating with you. Uh, Also, will they be honest with the information and with what they don't know? When somebody asks me a question and I don't know the answer, the best thing I can say is, I'm not sure. Let me look into that and get back to you. The worst thing I can say is make something up or like blow it off. I need you to have the information so you can make an informed decision. And if your agent is not forthcoming with I don't know, or it sounds like they're making things up, or they just blow you off, again, that's not the right agent for you.
Yeah. And like it's so important that you feel comfortable with this person, that you feel like that you can trust them. Because when we think about agents, the barrier to entry is not super high. So this is a career that you can get into in a couple of months, online training courses. You get paneled with a realtor company. Like you can become a real estate agent relatively easily compared to some other professions. So that's why we can see a lot of like our friends, our neighbors, our aunts or uncles might become realtors. You're like, okay, I know a realtor personally. It's not as hard to become one, which means that you have to really find the one who's going to be right for you and make sure you're finding the good one. That what was it, 3% or 7%? 7% that were good.
Yes, 7% that are good. You make a really good point. You said it's very easy to get in, and that's why you see so many people, so many people who are agents. Do not ever feel bullied into using your best friend, sister's, boyfriend's, brother's girlfriend to be your agent because they're your best friend, sister's, boyfriend's, brother's girlfriend. You should use the agent that's right for you. And if it's somebody that you don't know, great, then it's somebody that you don't know. But don't feel bullied by somebody saying, well, I've been your neighbor for 3 months now. You should use me. I see a lot of agents who feel like they own you because they know you in some periphery. But think about it, Rob, how many agents do you know?
I mean, I also do this a lot and I talk to a lot of local people. So I would say probably like 10 to 20, somewhere in there, that
Yeah.
either do this full time or have their license on the side.
Yeah. So 20, let's go with 20. That's 19. You can only use one to help you buy or sell. So that's 19 people that you didn't choose. Don't choose all 20 of them and go with somebody else.
Yeah. And, just because you have a family member who's doing it, please don't feel like, oh, you owe them your business, like Mindy said. And even I would almost caution against using family members unless they are, the best in the business. They've been doing this for a long time. Don't be the person who is getting someone their first property and their leg in the door. Like you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be their guinea pig. You don't want to be their first time. You want to be the person who is going with someone who knows exactly what they're doing is going to get you the best deal possible. And I don't even like in general mixing money with family. I feel like it can change the relationship, especially if things don't go well. And I kind of like to say, like, I'd like to find someone who is I'm not related to, or I don't know personally. And that's an easy way out of those conversations.
It is. And if they continue to push, then it's really about the money. It's not about the relationship. Everybody should want you to do the best for you.
And speaking of the money, important question to always ask when you're hiring someone, a product, service, whatever it is, how do they make money? Can you give us a very quick gist of how a real estate agent makes money from you as the person hiring them, as the buyer's agent?
As the buyer's agent, I have typically been paid by the seller's agent. So the seller contracts their agent to sell their house, and the seller pays their agent. In my area, it's around 6%, 5.8 to 6%, depending on whatever is negotiated between the two parties. Commission is negotiable. It is not set in stone. It is a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act to say this is the going rate or this is the commission that you have to pay. A commission is negotiable, but the agent doesn't have to. The agent can just say, I charge 6%. If you choose not to pay that, then you can find a different agent. That agent will then offer some of that commission to the buyer's agent. So it's an important legal distinction to note. It's not the seller paying the buyer's agent. The seller pays the seller's agent, and then the seller's agent pays the buyer's agent. But essentially, the seller is paying both agents. It is a commission based on the price of the home, or the sales price of the home. It is, you are typically signing an exclusivity agreement with your buyer's agent when they are representing you. Nobody works for free, so it's not unheard of it's not what's the word I'm looking for? It's not ridiculous to expect your buyer's agent to be paid, but there are some instances where, and this is where you want to read every single legal document that you're signing. There are some instances where you sign the agreement with your buyer's agent that says, I will make sure you make 3% of the sales price. And then if the seller's agent is only offering 2.5, you would be on the hook for the other 0.5%. These are the kinds of things you want to know before you're writing offers on properties, because there are ways to negotiate that into the contract, but you want your agent to be able to negotiate that on your behalf. But just know what you are signing when you're signing, and making sure that you are not signing up for an unexpected commission to your buyer's agent. You want to know what you're getting into. Does that make sense?
Yes. And that's so important, guys. When you sign any sort of contract or agreement, don't feel that pressure. I know there's that pressure when someone slides a piece of paper in front of you, is like, okay, please sign here and here. And you feel this uncomfortableness at stopping and reading the whole thing. You're like, okay, I'll just sign it. Like, it's probably fine. Take the time, read through it, make sure you're clear, ask questions. And if they're not willing to answer those questions for you, or they brush off, like, you don't need to worry about that, like, I'll take care of it. Like, I don't like that. That's a red flag for me. I want them to have that heart of the educator where they're like, no, let me explain this to you, what this means. And you're very clear on what you are signing up for.
Yes, because once you sign that, you are legally held to everything in there. So if you don't understand it, that doesn't mean that you're not legally held to it. You're still held to it. So if they say, oh, you don't need to know that. Yes, I do. Please explain it. If they can't explain it, then don't sign a contract with them.
Okay, so before you sign that contract with them, make sure you shop around. You don't have to sign up with the first realtor you meet. Go meet a couple of them. I would say at least 3. Rule of 3, interview 3 people, find out which one feels best for you, and then maybe go sign a contract with one of them, because they probably will ask that you say, if I'm going to buy a home, you will be the person to represent me, versus like jumping between them. No one wants to waste their time showing you a bunch of houses. Other thing to watch out for, we just heard about how realtors get paid. So it's a commission-based job, which means you get paid when you sell something. So if a realtor wants to make more money, it's a better, I say, dollar per hour of time put in if they sell a house fast and they sell a more expensive house to you. So make sure that your realtor is going to be the one who listens to you when you say, this is my budget. Do not show me a house. If my budget is $400,000 max, do not show me a house over $400,000. I don't want the temptation. I don't want to fall in love with it. And I want you to respect my boundary. And if you feel like they're playing HGTV with you and being like, here's house ABC, choose one, and that's it, do not fall into that trap either. Walk away. They should not be pressuring you to buy a house. They should be there to serve as your guide during this thing. Ideally, as long as it takes. I know, Mindy, you don't want to take 2 years or 10 years to buy a house, but at the same time, we want our customers to be happy, and us as buyers, we want to make sure we get the right deal.
I have heard agents say, well, I'll show you 10 houses. No, you should be able to see as many houses as you want with an asterisk next to it. I don't want you to sit there and, like you said, 10 years of looking at houses. Maybe there's something wrong with what you're expecting, but your agent should not limit you in how many houses they will show you. That's just lazy agenting. And yeah. I don't care who gets mad when I say that.
And we have to watch out for this, guys, as customers, like that we are knowledgeable about what we are signing up for. Okay, that was step 3. We spent a lot of time with the agent because it is a very important part of this process. Moving into step 4. So we've got our agent. The other big player in this process is who, Mindy?
Your lender. This is the person who is giving you the money to buy the house, because presumably you don't have $400,000 in cash sitting around.
Unlikely. Let's just say that. Okay, so what is I guess the lender's going to give us the money. Same thing as an agent. We should interview a couple of them. So don't just go with the first one. Look for recommendations. I would say all that stuff's the same. Is there anything different about finding a lender to an agent that we should be aware of?
There is. You should ask your agent, once you have decided on an agent, you should ask your agent if they have any lender recommendations. I have a lender that I work with all the time. I know he can close. I know that if he can't close, we're going to know about it way in advance. And when I say I know he can close, that means that he is going to go through the process of making sure that my buyers can borrow the money and make the payments on time and all of that. And then once we get to, there's dates and deadlines in the contract. Once we get to the loan approval deadline, he's going to say, yes, we can do it on by that date. And then he won't back out. He will bring the money to the closing table and he will give the money to the seller and we will then own the house. There are lenders who will, on the day or the day before of closing, say, ooh, we made a mistake. Sorry, we can't close. Oh, well, our date has probably already passed for the loan approval, and now we are at risk of losing our earnest money and not getting this property. So your earnest money is, in Colorado, it's about 1% of the purchase price. So on this $400,000 house, it's going to be $4,000. I don't know about you, but I don't like to lose a dollar. I certainly don't want to lose 4,000 of them. So I am very, very tight with my dates and deadlines, and your agent should be too. But also, this is your money. You should also be concerned with your dates and deadlines. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. Back to the lender. You want to make sure they can close. So if you have an agent and they recommend Bob at Elevations Credit Union, you should call up Bob and get Bob's rates. You want to call, like Rob said, you want to call a bunch of different lenders, local banks, credit unions, mortgage brokers, big banks. Talk to them all. Sit down pick a day, sit down and call everybody and ask them to quote you a rate. Tell them that you don't want them to do a hard pull on your credit, but instead you just are looking for a ballpark of what their rates are right now. Rates and closing costs, because closing costs do vary from lender to lender. And then write this all out in a spreadsheet so that you can compare apples to apples, because lender A might have a super great rate, but then closing costs are so much more expensive than anybody else that it kind of negates the rate. It isn't just about the rate that you're getting. And when they approve you, they should all pre-approve you for about the same amount. Let's call it 400,000. You might get 400 from somebody and 405 from somebody else and 395 from somebody else, but it'll all be about the same. Be wary of everybody's about the same. And then somebody's like, you could do 5. That's not necessarily in your best interest. Also be wary of the closing costs that are significantly lower. Everybody is around 12,000, 11,000, and then here's somebody at 4,000. Make sure that they're telling you what exactly is in those closing costs, because they may be assuming things that the other lenders didn't. The other lenders may be assuming things that this lender isn't. You just want to be able to compare apples to apples so you can make an informed decision. And then finally, once you have gotten an idea of who you want to use as your lender, go back to your agent and say, I'm thinking about using Bob.com as my lender. What do you think about that? Your agent, being the experienced person that they are, may have some really great experiences with this lender. They may have some really terrible experiences with this lender. There's a lender out there called Rocket Mortgage, and they don't have a great rep with the agent community, because there's a lot of, in the past, they have gotten to closing and then said, oh, we got to do one more thing. We have to push it back. We have to push it back. We have to push it back. I'm not saying that's going to be your experience. I actually have a client who has had a great experience with Rocket Mortgage twice. But when I have a listing and I'm seeing 2 offers that are about the same, and one is going with Elevations Credit Union, my preferred lender, and one of them is going with Rocket Mortgage, I can tell you who I'm going to steer my seller to, and it's going to be Elevations Credit Union, because I know they can close, and I know that there have been problems with Rocket Mortgage in the past. So this is not condemning Rocket Mortgage. They're a huge lender. They've done great things, but they've also sometimes had some not so stellar closing experiences with some buyers. So,
Reputation is everything. Yep. And doing your
reputation is
homework to
everything.
figure out what the reputation is great. Other piece of advice I'll throw in there is that unlike your agent, you do not have to sign an exclusivity agreement with a lender. So
Yes.
for my wife and I, like we had two lenders that we really liked. They're both great people, educators at heart, explained the whole process to us, made it very clear what was going on. They were very easy to get a hold of. So like if we found a property that we want to put an offer in, we could do that very quickly. And when the time came to do our actual house, the one that we ended up with, we gave it to both of them. And one of them was able to come back with a better rate than the other, just because they had done something like locking in the interest rate earlier. We're not going to go into the weeds of the mortgage process right now. That's for another day. But you can always go back to more than one lender and be like, hey, this is the property I want. Tell me what my worksheet for this is going to look like that shows me all my costs and what I can get approved for interest wise and that sort of thing.
Yep. And if there is somebody, if you had two lenders, but one of them you really, really liked and the other one came back with the better rate, you can always ask the lender that you really like to match the rate. The worst he can say is no.
Yep. Or I can't do that, or for whatever reason. But yes, you can always ask them to like, where are you flexible? Like, what can you do for me? Like, are there costs that are negotiable in this process? So like maybe part of the closing costs and fees can be negotiated down if they're really trying to win your business.
Yep.
All right,
And
moving on. Oh,
one last
go
thing I
on.
want to say is do not be afraid to ask your lender for explanations as well. This is their job, and this is some complicated legalese, and you are signing legal documents that compel you to make mortgage payments for 15 or 30 years. Make sure you know what you're signing and have a good understanding. And if you ask a question and you don't understand what they said, ask it again and keep asking until you do understand.
Oh, it's wonderful advice, guys. Make sure you are clear and make sure they take the time and they're not impatient with you. All right, we're on to step 5 in the home buying process. Now, this one's a nice, simple one. We've got our agent, we've got our lender. Our agent now is going to start sending us properties, listings of properties based on the things that we've told them we want, the price range that we've made it very clear that we want to stay within. And we should start going to see properties, right? Is there anything else that we should add into the step for us?
No, you just want to get sent listings so you can start keeping an eye on what's available, what is selling, and how fast it's taking these properties to sell. You can also ask your agent for if you see a property and you're not quite sure about it, ask your agent if there's an open house scheduled so you can go and see it to see if you really want more information about it. You should never feel afraid to ask your agent to show you a house, but if you're on the fence about it, hit the open house instead.
Yeah. And we should always see it like wherever possible, unless you are, I think, an experienced real estate buyer and you know a market very well. I think you always need to go see a place before you buy it. Step 6. So now we've done some browsing. We've seen a bunch of houses. I would make it a goal to go see like at least 10. Like I think like most things, don't fall in love with the first one you see. Try and see what else is out there just to make sure that the first one is the right one. But you found a house. You're like, I like it. It's ticking all my boxes. I'm very excited about it. I want to make an offer. How do we do that?
Your agent is going to write up the offer. And my current state contract is 21 pages long. It's filled with legalese that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing in legalese that it does in regular English. And every other year, I take an 8-hour class to learn how to fill out this contract properly. Don't try to go it alone. And a really good practice is right when you connect with your agent, ask them to send you a blank copy of the contract so you can read through it at your leisure and you can ask all the questions that you have. I have a sample contract that's written up and I send it to everybody as soon as I start working with them, trying to explain everything to them so that when we're making an offer and maybe it's a really hot house and we want to get our offer in quickly, I'm not sitting there for hours answering questions when we're trying to make an offer under a deadline. So if you have questions, you want to get those out of the way so you can understand the contract. This is a legally binding document. Once you sign it and the seller signs it, you are under contract and all the terms of the contract bind you together unless you cancel it. There is a very, very important section called dates and deadlines. And these are the dates by which you or the seller have to complete something or object to something or cancel the contract in order to be able to get your earnest money back. Like I said, it's about 1 or 2% of the cost of the property. So on that $400,000 house, that's $4,000 to $8,000. I don't want to lose that. I'm sure you don't want to lose that. So you want to make sure if you walk into the house, you make the offer, and then you have your home inspection and you're like, oh, everything's broken. Never mind. You want to cancel the contract so that you can get your earnest money back. So yeah, your agent will write the offer. There are conditions for the purchase. Like this offer is contingent upon me getting a loan. This offer is contingent on potentially on selling your old home. Not so much when you're a
Not for
first-time
our
home
first-time
buyer.
home buyers, yes, but that will be something that you might see on your second home, that you can't afford to buy the next home until you sell your first one. So you make it part of the contract that unless my first home sells, like until it sells, I can't move forward with this particular offer, but this offer is contingent on selling my old home.
Yep. Or, contingent upon me approving the HOA rules, me approving the title disclosures, the seller's disclosures, getting a loan, et cetera. So there's just a lot of things in a contract. Like I said, it's 21 pages long and it's tiny, tiny type. So getting a copy from your agent right at the beginning of your interaction can be really helpful. So you're not asking all of these questions or just confused by it at the time of offer.
All right. So that is our offer. And we covered like the big things that are in there. There is so much more, guys. And I don't want to spend 2 hours on this one. I want this to fit into a class period. So we're going to move into the next one. If you have questions, again, put them in the comment section. We will definitely get back in there and answer those for you. Mindy, we just did step 6. What is step 7? What comes after writing the offer?
You want to connect with the title company. The title company is the title insurance company. They are ensuring that there is a clean title, meaning the person who is selling the house has the ability to sell the house. They own the house. They have the right to sell the house to you, and that there's nothing clouding the title, such as an IRS lien or old contractors liens that haven't been paid yet. They run what's called a title search, and they see what if anything is out there. They will typically find a mortgage on the property, which will be paid at closing. They will typically find that Mindy Jensen owns this house, so that Mindy Jensen can now sell this house. They will provide an insurance policy. So if they missed anything during their title search and somebody comes back and says, hey, I own that house, not Mindy Jensen, they will make you whole. The amount of times I have had to use my title insurance policy is 0. And I always get one. And I always recommend everybody getting one, because you're buying a multiple hundred thousands of dollars house. And if somebody comes back and says, hey, that's my house, the person who stole it from me, you're left with nothing. And I don't want to lose $4,000. I super don't want to lose $400,000. So I always get a title insurance policy, and you should too.
I think the one I hear of most is like when someone inherits a house, like you might have one person who lives there, but there might be others who have a claim on that house too. Like mom passes away or mom and dad pass away. And like, okay, we have 3 kids, we're leaving the house to the kids, and one stays there, but the other 2 technically have part ownership. You want to make sure that the person selling you the house owns that house outright, and they have the permission of anyone else involved in this to sell that house too.
Yes.
Okay. So after we do the title search, check on the title search. We got the title insurance. Step 8.
Inspections and appraisals. So
sounds very exciting.
Yes. So your home inspection is when you hire somebody who is a licensed home inspector. If they're not a licensed home inspector, don't hire them. You hire a licensed home inspector to come into the house and check it out. They're going to test all the outlets. They're going to go up on the roof and make sure that the roof is in good repair. They're going to just look at things that you probably aren't going to look at. I'm trying to think. I use the same home inspector all the time, and I'm trying to think all the things he goes through, like the gutters and the downspouts, the grade of the dirt around the perimeter of the house, the condition of the fence. There's so many things that go into it. They test all the appliances, and you simply don't have time during your walkthrough of the house to do these thorough inspections. You want a home inspector. They test the furnace, they test the water heater, they tell you how old these things are. The inspector will tell you the condition of the home at the time of inspection. It is not a guarantee that the home's going to be perfect forever. It's just an assessment of the house at the time of inspection. I used to use a different home inspector, and he would give me like a 20-page report. It's good. And then I met Rick, the best home inspector on the planet, and Rick's inspections are like 75 pages long. They are books. And at the very beginning of the inspection, he's like, here's all the highlights. This is all written in red. It looks kind of scary. But when you go through it, you're like, ooh, it needs a new electric panel. That's $3,000 to start. And there's like Federal Pacific is a very common electric panel that causes fires in houses. I can't believe that anybody still has a Federal Pacific panel in their house. It's been known for years. And when you see that come up on an inspection report, your homeowner's insurance won't even cover your house. So you have to get it changed out. And that's, I mean, an agent should tell their seller this before it happens, but that's something that comes up on the inspection that you will want to ask for the seller to fix before closing. So your home inspector will go in and inspect the house. You will walk through with the inspector. They'll point out the highlights. They'll send you the report. And then you use that with your agent to request any repairs, concessions, or to cancel the contract, depending on how serious the issues are.
So yeah, you're saying like, even though mom is pretty handy, like mom can't be the person to walk through my house and tell me that it's in great condition unless she is a licensed home inspector like this.
I would not recommend. Now, technically, you are allowed to use any inspector you want, but I would not recommend using anybody but a licensed home inspector.
Okay. And then the other one you said was the appraiser.
The appraiser.
How's that different?
The appraiser looks at the house and gives an assessment of the value of the home. This is based on the condition of the home, as well as what other homes, similar homes nearby, have sold for recently. And that happens near the end of the contract process, right before you get a loan approval. The appraisal is scheduled by the lender. It is paid for by you, either upfront or at the closing table. It's about $700, but your mileage may vary depending on what part of the country you live in. And it is necessary to get a loan unless you're putting an enormous amount down, like 50% down or something like that. But you want to make sure that you have that scheduled near the end of the contract, because if you're going to cancel the contract, you don't want to throw $700 at an appraisal that never needs to take place in the first place.
So yeah, this is to protect the lender from making a loan on a house that isn't worth the loan. Because remember, their job is to assess the risk. So if you're asking for $400,000 to buy a home and they appraise it and they're like, actually, this is only a $300,000 house. You're paying way over market value right now. If we have to take this house back and try and sell it, we're not going to get our loan back. So we're not going to loan you more than $300,000 for this property. And that saves you from yourself, I think, a little bit as well. Like, stops you from making offers that are too big for something that isn't worth what you're offering. And it may be hard news to hear, because I mean, two appraisers could come back with different numbers, right? It's not like there is a sound formula that every appraiser is going to come back with the exact same thing. So can you get a second opinion, or is this really like the lender picks and you're stuck with whatever they pick?
I have had some success, some very small success, with asking an appraiser to reassess the home. But when you have success is when there's an obvious error. I live in a 4-bedroom house. If they write up the appraisal as a 2-bedroom house, that's grounds for requesting a new appraisal. If they write it up as a 4-bedroom house and they just think it's worth 400 and I think it's worth 425, chances are good they're not going to reassess. And the lender is not going to hire another appraiser. Even if you pay for it, they're not going to be inclined to hire another appraiser who comes in at 425. Well, why does this guy say 425 and this guy says 400? So it really does have to be an egregious error in order for you to make it worth their while to request another appraisal. But I have had success doing that in the past.
And I'd say probably on the seller side, it's more important as well what it appraises for, because you want the most money for your home. And on the buyer side, you're kind of, you're just making sure you don't make a bad decision. But the seller is the one who's really like, I need this to appraise for more to make more money, of course.
Yep.
Okay. So we got the inspection, check. Appraisal, yes. What's next? We're on step 9.
Okay, we have gotten through our contract, and I'm breezing through this contract. There's a lot more to it, and you definitely want to ask your agent for an expectation of what's going to happen in your specific market. But we've gone through the whole contract, and now we are right the day of closing. It is time for your final walkthrough. You do not want to miss this step. And I really like to schedule the final walkthrough and then we drive to the closing table. So there really is almost no chance of anything happening to the house before closing. A final walkthrough a week before closing, you've got a whole week of stuff that could happen. So you walk through the house and you look around. You make sure that the washer and dryer that you said in the contract should be included with the house is still there. You make sure that everything is still there. When they were moving their furniture out, they didn't put a big gash in the wall and then not fix it.
This happened to us. We did our final walkthrough and the back basement window had been smashed, like a full glass door. The window was smashed during the move out process. And we had to be like, that's not supposed to be there. So yeah, at the closing table. So we went right before we went to closing. At the closing table, we had to adjust the contract to be like, you need to fix this as part of this sales process. And thankfully, like we were able to do that. But yeah, you don't go a week, 2 weeks beforehand because you want to make sure you are buying the property that you think you are buying.
Yeah. I read an article once in the paper that this couple went to their walkthrough and then the next day they closed and then they drove to the house that they owned and every plant in the front yard had been dug up. The sellers had taken the landscaping and they're like, what? You don't consider writing into the contract must leave landscaping. And that's a thing where it's attached to the house or the ground. So it should be assumed that it comes with it. That would have been something that you have to write into the contract is not coming with it. But yeah, don't leave things to chance. I'm really surprised. I was almost going to say, Rob, before you jumped in and said this happened to you, I was going to say, this is super rare, but apparently it's not. 50% of the people on this call have had that happen. So
true. But then you account for the number of times you've bought a home and that percentage goes down. So it can happen. You just want to make sure that you are paying for what you assume you are getting and doing the final walkthrough. So you just walk through the house, you make sure everything's there. It's all in still good shape. You're buying what you thought you were buying. Then you drive yourself over to the final closing table, which is our last step. We've made it to step 10 in the house buying process. And this is probably one of the most tedious steps of it. I remember sitting for a very long time at this very big closing table with a very big stack of papers in front of me. So tell us about the closing table. What happens there?
Yes. Well, now a lot of the closing can be done prior, where your lender will send you documents to sign online. But at the closing table, there are still a couple of documents that need wet signatures or an actual ink on paper signatures. You are responsible for a down payment. Unless you're getting a VA loan or a USDA loan, which comes with a 0% down payment, you are going to give the bank or give the seller some money, and then the bank is going to give them the rest. You are, in almost every situation, required to wire these funds. And wiring funds is technically instant, but it can take a couple of days as well. So you want to do this a couple of days in advance, and you want to be talking to the title company well in advance, asking them for wire information, asking them for the wire number, the bank account number that they need to wire. What I recommend my clients do is physically walk into the title company and get a copy of their wire instructions, an actual physical piece of paper, and then take that to their bank and physically hand it to their bank and say, can you wire this much money to this account? And then the bank takes care of it. There's no questions. Wire fraud is a huge problem. This is when an agent has a password on their email, like password 123, and somebody breaks into their account, sends an email to the buyer and says, "Ooh, the bank account number changed. Wire it here instead." This actually happened to a friend of mine. And when I read her posting on Facebook, she's like, "Ooh, I got this email right before closing. I'm so glad I found it." I was like, "Oh no, this happened. This was like 6 hours ago. She posted this. Oh, I bet the money's gone." And what happened was she was scammed by the stupidest person ever who left it in an American bank account long enough for her to understand what happened. And her bank called that bank and they froze the accounts. But it was like 3 or 4 very stressful weeks before she was able to get her money back. In most cases, that money is gone. The scammers are watching the account. As soon as money hits the account, they whisk it away someplace else where it can't be retrieved. And what you need to know is that your agent is never going to call you or email you and tell you that the bank account has changed. Your title company is most likely never going to tell you this either. The bank account isn't going to change. It's always going to be the same. So you want to be working with the title company. And then once you wire the funds, you want to call them up and say, "Hey, I wired this. Did you get it?" When they say, "Yes, we got it," great, you're done. And when they don't, then, I mean, I don't even want to talk about that because it's so heartbreaking to even think about that. Just know that nobody is going to email you and say the numbers have changed.
Yeah. I mean, that goes for good, like email security, personal security in general, like, people asking from banks, from credit unions, from credit cards, like nobody's going to send you these kind of strange emails being like, "Oh yeah, just send us back your social security number, date of birth." Like, you just have to be a mindful consumer of technology. And this is a very important place to be careful to, if you get an email from your agent, to pull out your cell phone, you got their phone number, call them up, be like, "Did you send me this email?" Or your title company, and just verify that if something strange comes through, that it is actually from them and intentional.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we fill out a lot of forms. We sign on the
Sign
dotted
your
line.
name 1,000 times.
Yeah, not just once, a lot of times. We're done. So we get the keys and off we go. Is there anything else?
You want to read everything that you're signing. So ask your title company and your lender for these documents. They need to give them to you well in advance. Just ask them for them ahead of time so you can read through and understand and ask questions when you don't understand everything that you're signing. My dad once bought a house, his first house, and he sits down at the title company and starts reading. And the title person's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm reading these documents." She's like, "You just need to sign here." He said, "I haven't read them yet. I'm going to read them." And she's like, "What?" They're not expecting you to read them. That doesn't mean you can't read them. You have every right to read them. Don't make anybody force you to sign something that you haven't read. But reading them in advance is going to be very helpful because then it turns a 1 hour signing into like a 9 hour signing.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. And you get to read it without the pressure of someone looking over your shoulder and you rushing through it. Like, you get to stop, underline the parts you have questions about, ask your realtor the questions, make sure it's very clear. But yes, you have bought a house at this point. Congratulations. You are a first-time homeowner. You get to go back to your brand new house, probably change the locks.
Definitely change the locks.
Yeah, make sure there's no extra keys floating around there. Like, old mom isn't going to turn up at 1 a.m. and like say, "Oh, I just had a key. I want to let myself in." You want to change all those locks first thing. But yeah, that is our step-by-step process to buying a home. I hope that if you have questions, you're putting them in the comment section. I don't see any popping up yet, which is great. But thank you so much for sticking with us through these 10 steps. If you do have questions, drop in the comments. We will answer them as soon as we can. We're just under the hour mark, so I'm going to keep this very quick. Mindy, I ask one question of all my guests when they come on, and that is, what is your number one piece of advice for any teen who's looking to build wealth, and particularly around buying a house, if you want to keep it that way?
Ooh, if my number one piece of advice for teens who want to build wealth is to open up a Roth IRA and contribute absolutely as much as you can to it every single year, up to the max, of course, which I think is $6,000 or $7,000 this year. Because your money in a Roth IRA, you pay taxes now when you are in probably the lowest tax bracket that you'll ever be in. So you're paying taxes and your money is growing tax-free, where you can take it out tax-free when you retire. But you can also withdraw money from your Roth IRA to buy a house. I don't love that idea, but it's something that you can do. You can withdraw it for buying a house, medical bills, and I think school. So It's an option. I don't love it for that particular option, but the tax-free growth is huge, especially with so much time in your future.
All right, Mindy, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, everyone who's been here. Make sure you follow along at Bigger Pockets Money, listen to the podcast, and we'll see you next time. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. And if anybody has questions that they think of later, you can email Mindy at biggerpockets.com.
All right, see you all soon.